We're going to have the models take off their shoes. And I was like, what? What is that even? Why? What does that have to do with anything? The crowd's like, whoa. Apparently, the entire convention is absolutely on the edge of their seats.
Wouldn't it be?
All right, welcome to Diaries of an Entrepreneur Week 4. I got the agenda up here, topics I want to cover in this journal entry. I got the best story I've heard the last couple of weeks, what I'm doing, why I'm doing this, the stuff investors want to hear, and the stuff investors don't want to hear. During the course of this diary entry, I'm going to ask you 3 questions that I'm hoping that you'll comment on in the video. Yeah, you'll see those questions as we go along. Okay, so the best story I heard this week, I'm not going to do this justice because it was also the quality of the storyteller. She was a master storyteller. So let me give you some context. So this is important. That's why I'm telling you this before I get into the story. I went to get my hair cut today, and I am someone who likes to spend as little money as possible on a haircut. Very basic. Keep it number 5 on the back and sides, blend it in on top, and have done that for as long as I can remember. And I go to this place that charges $20 for a haircut. It's a reasonable price. You know what you're getting. They're usually like 20 to 35-year-old women of varying quality, but they get you done quick. Today, went for my haircut in preparation for this big recording, and wouldn't you know it, there's this old lady that looks out of place. Her hair is done to the nines. I mean, everyone else looks like they don't give a shit how they look, frankly, but she's too old, probably like in her 60s, and very well done. So go to have a haircut with her, and she's going pretty slow. I'll let you judge the actual haircut at the end. You'll see why it's relevant. She ends up telling me about how she's been cutting hair for 40 years, and she loves the craft of cutting hair. She's been retired, but she needed to come out. And she used to do these like haircut conventions / competitions, and she has 35 trophies, many of them that go up to her waist for her ability to cut hair. You come with the model to these conventions. You have to have at least 6 inches of hair to work with, and then you, over a few hours, do them up, and then 5 to 10 judges judge your work and award the prize money. It's apparently expensive to enter these competitions. Payouts are big if you win. So she's telling me all the places she's gone and how big a part of her life this is. And then she gets to this absolutely unbelievable story. She goes, let me tell you the craziest story of all my time cutting hair. I was like, I'm ready for this. Got nothing better to do. She's like, it was in Nassau in the Bahamas. There at a convention, and I had my model with me, and we're in the competition. And I spent my time doing her hair, doing it perfect, getting it just right. I was in the zone. And then the judges go around, they evaluate, they announce 3rd place. Then they announce 2nd place. And they say, we've never had this happen before, but we have 2 people we cannot decide who's first. And I was like, well, why don't they just share first? She's like, no. They couldn't, because they said, we only have 1 trophy. So there's no way you guys are here for the trophy. This is the big deal. We could split the prize money, but only one of you was going to get this trophy. And it was about up to your waist. And so they huddled up, the 5 to 10 judges. They talked together for 15 minutes. We were sitting there. I was nervous, Nelly. And one of the judges comes up and announces, for the first time in history, we have 2 competitors. We cannot determine who is better, no matter what criteria we use. So we're going to have the models take off their shoes. And I was like, what? What is that even? Why? What does that have to do with anything? And she says how the crowd's like, whoa. Everyone's like, oh, crazy. Like, I mean, apparently the entire convention is absolutely on the edge of their seats. Everyone completely crazed by this suggestion from the judges. I'm totally lost right now. I'm like, what? Why take off your shoes? What does that have to do with anything? And she's like, oh, child, if you try to beautify someone, this is a cosmetology beautification convention. This is not just about the hair. If you really getting someone done, you gotta take care of them feet too. And I was like, oh man. So you had the feet. She's like, oh, of course I did. You know it. Those feet were done, pedicured. They smelled fantastic. And those judges couldn't get within 10 feet of that other model. Smelled like corn chips. I was dying. What a twist ending. She comes home with first place, best haircutting experience of her life. I mean, what a killer story. She's like, now let me tell you, the lesson from that story, why I still remember, is if you love something, if you do it because you love it, it will show up in all the details. You get the details right. And I was like, damn, wow, this lady, I mean, I gotta tell you, the haircut was like 30 minutes longer than it should have been. I'm not even sure the quality of the haircut was that good. So this is question number one. Look, I'm gonna come up closer to the camera here, show you a little bit of the angles. This is the haircut. Comment below with your number, 1 to 10, quality of this haircut. I give it an 8. The best haircuts I've usually gotten are ones where people are going super quick, like they just know what they're doing with scissors. This was not that. This was a very slow, methodical haircut. So if she's trying to maximize earnings, if you're working at Lady Jane's, you're churning through these people. That's how you're getting, you got to just work through them. This was not going to be efficient from a monetary standpoint. So I don't know whether maybe she's a quality barber in a different light. And if she was running her own salon, she was telling me how these trophies would be advertisements for her. There's something that may not add up about this story. The whole genesis of the story, by the way, was me saying 5 on the back and sides and her telling me it's just not going to work for your sideburns. You need to go 3 on the sideburns, then 4, and then 5. So she wanted a little bit more coming in off the sides. And, like I give it an 8 out of 10, the haircut. And I'm honestly not sure where to place the truthfulness of the story, because she also ended with, when I said that was one of the best stories I've heard in a long time, I gave her a nice tip at the end of the haircut. And then the last thing she says as I'm walking away, she's like, and don't you forget, that's a real life story right there. And I was like, who describes real stories by saying they're real? It's like, that's the thing you say if you're telling a lie. Like, I'm a reasonable liar. And I know one of the main tells that you try to avoid is overemphasizing the truthfulness of your story. So that gives me some skepticism. The fact that, why are you working at Lady Jane's and not running your own salon? Apparently she just come out of retirement. This is question number 2. Is she telling the truth? How much exaggeration is a part of this story? On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being this is completely made up and fabricated, 1 being completely 100% accurate. Yeah, so give me your 1 to 10 score on if she's telling the truth. I mean, I don't care because she was a master storyteller. I'm not someone who cares that much about the quality of my haircut. And regardless of whatever else, she took her craft seriously. But it was just an awesome story and reminded me of how much wisdom there is with age. I've always loved listening to old people tell stories. It was one of the greatest things about being with my grandparents, is like hearing them tell the same, because you've whittled down at that point to like your best 10, 15 stories. You don't have like story number 100 in the chamber. So you just hit those ones and you hit the same beats. You've just mastered the craft of telling those stories. She had me on the edge of my seat. I mean, it didn't matter that the haircut took way too long. So that was the best story I heard. All right. So what I'm doing, I know I haven't been super clear about this, so I'm just trying to be as clear as I can. I'm planning on pulling together a group to start a new middle and high school here in North Carolina. I don't want to say anything more than that because, well, I'm doing this other podcast that I'll announce shortly, but let me share a quick clip from one of the episodes that we've recorded. It's coming out in the fall, and it's with one of the guys I respect a ton. His name's Michael Barber, and he's talking about how you tell the story if you're trying to accomplish something radical, transformative, innovative. So let me just play this clip.
In my book, It Comes From, I talk about the communication strategy, and there are different options. And I set out 2 paradigms for that using literature. Moby Dick, okay, very big, fat novel. And the main character is the terrifying Captain Ahab, right?
Yep.
He first appears in my edition of it on page 217. You've read 217 pages before the main character even appears on a page. So that's one option, and quite a good option. And it might be that you want to just make a lot of difference and then say, look, now here's our communication. So you do it almost under the radar, and then you suddenly appear on page 217. Or if you take Great Expectations, written by Charles Dickens, roughly around the same time as Melville, Moby Dick. In Great Expectations, the 2 key characters, Pip and Magwitch, appear on page 1 and 2 in a terrifying scene in a graveyard by the Thames. So he just goes for, here are my characters. Right, now you're going to see what happens to them. Whereas Melville builds it up and then you're into. So when you're doing a strategy, you can do the Melville option or the Ahab option. If you do the second one, it helps to galvanize things, but it also puts you under pressure because you've made a big announcement before you've done anything. So when people say 2 months later, they say, well, there's that huge announcement, but nothing's happened.
I'm trying to go the Pip route where I'm literally announcing that I'm starting a school before I've done anything. And part of my strategy for doing so is hopefully attracting more like-minded people to the mission. And the other element that came through in accomplishment is you were talking about how you don't do things to be remembered by history, but if you do, make sure you write the first version yourself. And that struck me because I feel like we always ask retrospectively what happened in this journey, and our memories get shaped over time. The stories, how we connect those dots are different. When you ask a successful person how they succeeded, there's some element that may get lost just because of how their memory connects things and how they try to shape a narrative and the way in which human minds work.
Yes, that is entirely true. And by the way, when you set up a school like you're doing, at some point you do have to, you can't rely purely on the Ahab route because you've got to tell the parents that your school is there and attract some students. And those founding families are really important to you because they're putting faith in an idea. They can't come and see your school.
Absolutely.
So the way you think about that, to me, is really crucial. But on the history point, I always say this, if you're going to do an innovation and if you want to remember and maybe one day write about it, you need to write a journal, a diary.
So even though this is a diary and I'm trying to be as real as possible, part of being real this early is that I have to recognize that if I say something that doesn't resonate with the potential customer or doesn't capture what I end up doing. Because I came across this article by Seth Godin, who's like a marketing expert and a really good writer. And he says, the wrong question is, our project isn't catching on. How do we promote it better? The right question is a little more nuanced and far more important. We're seeking to make a change in part of the world. How do we find the right people and tell them the right, true story that helps them get to where they're going and that they'll tell to their peers? And then there's the key line. Promotion might make sense after you've got all of this figured out. And there's 2 things. I've had some private conversations. It's clear to me that I don't have this figured out. And I don't think I need to, because part of what attracts me to starting a school versus, let's say, writing another book is the possibility, like, you think writing a book that's intended for young adults, the kids in this age group, you can think this is my version of what I want to communicate with these students. But what excites me about building a school is it's a collective. There's a group of us that are trying to collectively come together and say, what do these kids need? And I'm excited about that collaborative effort. So I have recognized in my conversations that I'm missing some key elements to be able to nail this question, the right marketing question, the answer there. And I want to shape that with the people that I'd like to have on the boat. And so we will come up with this. And when it's in the right place, I'll share it. So I'm starting a school, but people just want to know, like, what makes it different? Why is this school got to exist? Believe me, I recognize that the question's importance. In fact, because I recognize the question's importance and I'm not satisfied with my own answer yet, I'm not sharing it here. So that's that. Now, why I'm doing this, the stuff investors do want to hear. So I saw this tweet by Andrew Wilkinson, who I've heard on a couple podcasts and really respect what he's tried to build and how he's tried to build it. He had a tweet about the education space, which he has not been in. It's like, I hated high school. It was like being in prison. Let you read it on your own. But it really stuck with me and resonated on a lot of levels. Anyways, this just got my mind thinking like, oh, this guy outside the space is showing an interest in what I've always felt is a very niche space here in North America, actually. And I've been in the private school world for the last 10 years. So it's always fun when someone is entering this arena and thinking about it. So let me just explain why I think this is a good business to be in. The economics of private schools. Like, let me just say a few things about this, which is, one, people think of this as like a philanthropic endeavor, and a lot of the schools are structured as nonprofits. That means nothing. They grow their endowments. They charge a very hefty tuition. And private schools are not going away. They're only going to be in greater demand for the coming decades. The public system is under increasing pressure. Really, the economics make a lot of sense. We think of them as these nonprofit endeavors, a lot of the private schools you go to. But if I could invest in Detroit Country Day School, the middle and high school that I went to in Michigan, I would do so in a heartbeat. It's set up so well for the long run in a great area with great facilities, room to expand, excellent market positioning in a market that people is just not going away, no matter what. In a world that's changing faster and faster, the premium on education is only more relevant for parents. They want their kids to have a leg up in this volatile, scary world that faces them. As long as we live in a world where there's relative winners and losers, there's going to be a premium for that. There's more and more people like Andrew thinking about the school experience. I read this other article that was about one of the major school groups, and it just captures this. Private school is not going away. It is a market that is going to be increasingly relevant. You could talk about online schooling all you want, but people want to be in person. The vast majority will continue to want a great social and preparatory experience to ensure their kids have the best chances of success at life. So it's a great market to be in if you can do one key thing. And that's, it comes down to consistently location, location, location. And I mean that in distinct ways. Location meaning, where are you actually? Is it convenient for people to get to in person? I mean location in terms of, how does it present? Like, is this a place that you feel your kids will be happy in? It really does matter to people, the space their kids will be spending time in. And location, like, are you in a market that's set up for the future? How is your market set up in terms of demographics for the long run? And so if you can get those location metrics correct, you have the ingredients for an extremely successful school. You have to deliver. Of course, you have to get the details right. But that's the biggest thing that I know I need. You can get everything else right, get this wrong, and fail. And so this is where I know I need help. So this is the last question. Please comment below, reach out if you can think of anyone. I am not a real estate expert. I need to figure out the process by which I can get to know someone locally that is going to help me. It may not just be one person, maybe more than one, that can help me secure the right location. Someone who has the vision to say, this space can be a space for the right school. This is a good location to be in. I know the broader triangle area is the right location for the long run. I think there's so many positive attributes to this area that mean it will continue to have an influx of growth for the coming decades. So I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried about eventually coming up with the right answer to that marketing question that I shared. But I am worried about finding the right location. So if you can comment below with any help, anyone I should talk to, let me know. Please reach out. Okay, the last part of my journal entry is why I'm doing this, but the stuff investors don't want to hear. So I made you wait for the juicy stuff. But the last couple weeks since this storytelling camp, I've just been decompressing, thinking about what the next chapter looks like. And these articles all resonated for one reason or another. There was this be sincere, not serious. The article is perfect for me. It references Harry Potter. It references Alan Watts, someone who I couldn't pick out of a lineup, but I've listened to probably like 100 hours of his lectures on the Waking Up app. And some of my favorite songs are basically electronic dance music with his lectures kind of spun over them. This difference between being serious and being sincere was really important to me and really resonated. Everyone thinks if you're starting a school, how can you be as serious as possible? This is a very serious endeavor. You're dealing with other people's kids. What a responsibility, one not to be taken lightly. And I recognize that. I really do. But I'm also trying to hold this idea that I want to approach this with real sincerity. Yeah, so I recommend reading this article if you want to understand more about what that means. And then this one, a friend sent to me. It's called "Hurry Up, Get More Done, and Die," and it's the classic kind of argument for less productivity in our lives, less checklists, which I am notorious for. So I also trying to recognize that, in other words, you have your gift, your offering, your divine instructions. Don't screw it up. So I'm trying to keep this thought in my mind as I embark on this chapter, which is, it's hard. I am a to-do list person. I recognize that, but there's this other element that you have to balance in your mind as well. And then this letter called the Sublime Newsletter, taken a couple forms, but I really enjoy her writings. Her name's Sari Azut. And a lot of this really spoke to me as well, which were these questions. Will you use this opportunity to grow and evolve, or will you use it to beat yourself up? How will you avoid insecurity work? Can you learn to enjoy the process as the end in itself, not the means? Will you default to the norms of your industry, or will you be an original? What tools will you use to quiet your ego and see reality clearly? Do you have clarity on what kind of financial value you aim to create? So all these questions hit me hard. There's a lot more in this, but I just really loved thinking about that and keeping those questions in my mind. And then the last was, I always read Packy McCormick. There's a high degree of overlap in our Venn diagram: interest in startups, interest in science fiction, interest in sports. So I've followed his newsletter for a long time, and he wrote this piece called "When My Kids Are My Age." It's kind of a prognostication of what their life will be like in the 2050s. And it wasn't my favorite piece, if I'm going to be honest. He's a little more optimistic than I am about the future. But the part that struck me was this ending. As I sat here writing this on Father's Day while my kids were playing on the beach, I thought of the story of the investment banker and the fisherman. You know the story. There's a fisherman who fishes a little every day, siestas with his wife, spends time with his kids, and dances with his friends. An investment banker vacationing in town tells him that he could fish more, expand, take on financing, make a lot of money, and then retire early to fish a little every day, siesta with his wife, spend time with his kids, and dance with his friends. It got me. I stopped writing, went down to the beach, and played with my kids. There's no point in getting excited about living longer and being able to work less if you already don't get to enjoy the time you have with the people you love. But they're at the beach again, and I'm here writing. Unlike the fisherman, I don't want the world to look the same when I retire as it does today. Now that part really resonated, and it kind of like I was ready. That's why I'm doing this. Like I've seen what it's like being the fisherman. I've loved it, but I'm recognizing that in this next chapter, this last line is what's speaking to me. And now the last thing investors don't want to hear is random business ideas. But I came across this article, Micro Companies, the EdTech business model we've been waiting for. So the basic point of this article is how EdTech has been a notoriously difficult space to invest in. And maybe there's an angle with AI for these micro companies that could raise less financing and become profitable more quickly, but not scale to dramatic levels. So instead of the typical venture capital finance route, where you continue raising subsequent rounds till you're a unicorn and valued at over $1 billion, here we're saying, can you create a business worth, 50 to 100 million, but do so by taking on less capital, so you're able to still return investors a reasonable return on their investment. And they explain why this could be the case with AI and how lean teams might be able to do this in the ed tech space. And I thought the point was fantastic in general, but it missed the investor lens to me. Is I've seen these micro companies, like, yeah, Pearson, in some ways we were investing along this route. But what I've learned from that side is if you're a venture capitalist, you're just not used to setting up the incentives to return your capital time efficiently. So it was much harder to get the capital out than I had anticipated. And if you can't raise money for this, that's the biggest problem for why these micro companies may not end up panning out like this, because they might just be forced through the nature of the game itself to languish or take on further rounds of financing that force them down a path of no return. And my answer to this is, I think the real answer is like a private equity roll up here, which is if you bought into this thesis, which I'm reasonably bought into as an idea, you ought to set up a fund, raise essentially a mini private equity fund to go after these micro companies and either acquire a majority stake or an option to taking over a majority and put them all under a holding company. Because what that will do is that will allow you to liquidate so much more easily. So instead of trying to get dividends on the company, figure out how to get out each individual single that you're hitting, if you put them together, they all fall under an ed tech umbrella, and suddenly your holdco is then a very valuable asset that trades at a huge multiple. So you'll have a multiple arbitrage there and the ability to liquidate. And so if you believed in this thesis, the right way to attack it would be to raise a fund to roll up in this space and go after it, set some metrics, and just operate with like a David Sachs type efficiency. It's not going to be what I go after, but that's my business idea of the week. That's where I'm at. That's it.